In today's video, we're taking a look at the latest NHL trade rumors as NHL teams are eliminated from the playoffs. There's already speculation about what changes they need to make. We're taking a look today at the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Edmonton Oilers, the Florida Panthers, and the Nashville Predators. And that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're taking a look at some NHL trade rumors I've come across. The information today comes from a few different articles I've come across through The Athletic, as well as ESPN and Greg Wyshynski and Emily Kaplan, discussing a lot of the changes that we might see for some of these NHL teams that have been eliminated from the qualifying round and have failed to advance on to the official first round of the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs here for 2020. Now, we've seen a lot of eliminations yesterday. Obviously, it was a big day in the NHL. Lots of action, 6 games. It led to 5 teams being eliminated. We had a few teams eliminated previously before that. Now we're down to 7 of the 8 qualifying round series are complete. We only have the Leafs and the Blue Jackets to remain, which goes Game 5 to end that round tomorrow evening. Now, as I mentioned, let's kick things off first with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, like I said, there's a variety of sources here on the information today. Some of it's from The Athletic, some of it's from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and some of it's from The Athletic here. There's obviously a lot of question marks around Pittsburgh. Now, obviously, they won the Stanley Cup back a few years ago, but really ever since that last Stanley Cup, things have been somewhat downhill. And if you look at the Pittsburgh team that played Montreal in that final game when they were eliminated, it just seemed to be very much unmotivated. Even Mike Sullivan seemed to be having a hard time getting his troops going. And these articles raise a lot of important points, the things that we might see from Pittsburgh. Now, of course, we talked a lot recently about Murray and Jerry and who stays and who goes, and these articles go on to discuss those points as well. Many feel that the more likely scenario, which I've said before, is I think Tristan Jerry gets signed, Matt Murray gets moved. Since that last Stanley Cup, Matt Murray's been incredibly inconsistent. We saw them go to Tristan Jerry during Game 4, which was their most important game of the season to try to stay alive. So that tells me that as an organization, they probably have more confidence in him longer term at least. Obviously, Murray's had a good track record, but like I said, ever since he entered the league, won those back-to-back Stanley Cups, things have been somewhat downhill ever since, and he's going to be looking for a pretty significant long-term deal, I would think, if he can get it, along with a significant raise because of his resume and 2 Stanley Cups so early on in his NHL career. Now, besides that, though, there's a lot of talk that there could be some more significant change. What kind of moves will Jim Rutherford make with this organization? I mean, he traded Phil Kessel last year. There was obviously some growing issues between Kessel and the team, and after another failed playoff performance, they wanted to shake things up a little bit, so obviously that happened, and really this year they're no further ahead. They had the ideal matchup, really, for the most part. If you think about going into these playoffs, because of the NHL pause and everything that happened, they got the lowest ranked team amongst all the 24 teams that returned, and they not only did they lose, but they were somewhat embarrassed by Montreal. I mean, the Habs really played way better than the Penguins did. It wasn't even really all that close. The Penguins did win 1 game, but Carey Price, even though he was really good through this series, early on especially, but in Game 4 when it mattered most, he didn't have to steal the win. The Penguins really just were not in it. I mean, and you could say that the coaching staff made some questionable choices as well, which some of the articles we're referencing here wonders if we might see some more significant change. Could GM Jim Rutherford dangle a core piece like a Chris Letang? Obviously, many teams around the league are going to have some salary cap issues, and obviously moving out a higher price player to give them more flexibility might be a way to go. Now, Letang's been mentioned before, but nothing's obviously ever come from it. His name has been really not kind of quiet in the last little while, but there was a point a few years back when Chris Letang's name was mentioned. Of course, he went through a really long stretch there where he was very unhealthy, missed a lot of time, and I think that was a big part of the reason why a lot of people speculated if they should move on from him. But he has been better since the last couple of years here, but obviously that would be, a big time piece of their core veteran group that could be moved. I mean, there's no doubt that he could fetch a decent return. It would give them a lot much needed cap flexibility, but at the same time, the Penguins blue line has been a big part of their issues. Like Jack Johnson had a terrible series. You could say that Sullivan played him way too much, and his ice time has certainly been up for debate as well. So that's certainly not good. You get Justin Schultz, who's an unrestricted free agent. He's going to be looking for some term and some money, which they probably can't really afford either. So it really doesn't make sense to move Letang if you're going to have some other changes. Hard to say, but it's just been talk about could they move a more significant piece. And you know that Crosby and Malkin are not going to be the ones to get moved. I mean, that's pretty much a given. I think we can take those two guys along with some maybe a few others that would probably be somewhat untouchable, like a Jake Gensel, probably Jason Zucker, Brian Rust. Those are probably players that they would not want to move. I mean, we would think of some guys that could be, though, like a Nick Bukestad, I think is possible. I mean, he didn't get to play in these playoffs because he's battling an injury and recovering, wasn't able to play yet. But his question was in future before everything came back. I mean, you got Jared McCann ended up being a healthy scratch in this series, too, at one point. His play's been down a bit, so you kind of help wonder his future. You have some other players, like I said, like Jack Johnson's a prime example of a player who should go. It's a contract they should have never signed. But another big piece here, though, that's been talked about in these articles is head coach Mike Sullivan. He's been there a long time, has a great track record. He's got a couple of Stanley Cups to his name. But the last few years have not been overly as successful as the 2 cup seasons. And is it time for a change behind the bench? I mean, and if Sullivan doesn't go, could they maybe make other adjustments to the coaching staff? They need some kind of a change, some different voices in there to maybe get this team going, because clearly, like I said, they were very much unmotivated in the series against Montreal. It's a series that they should have won, could have easily been avoided, and for whatever reason, they just could not get themselves together to beat Montreal. I mean, Montreal played great. I'm not going to take away from what they accomplished, but I think even most Habs fans could agree that they expected a much more difficult, tougher series out of Pittsburgh. And, you know, I figured if Montreal would win, it would be like a 5-game series right to the wire. Pittsburgh would put up a great fight, but it wasn't even that. Like, Montreal won without too much difficulty. Price didn't have to steal the whole series. Like, it just really wasn't the Penguins that I thought we were going to see in this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. So you can't help but wonder, like I said, after a couple of years of failed playoff performances, even though they've had a decent amount of regular season success, if it's a time for a coaching change, and will we see some significant change to the Penguins lineup, not just the goaltending situation that we've been discussing here over the last several months leading into this. Now, as I mentioned as well, I want to talk a little bit quickly here on the Florida Panthers. I know we've already touched on yesterday about the rumors that GM Dale Talon's going to be fired, that there's already talk about he's going to be released. And that has not been officially confirmed, by the way, by the Panthers. The reports indicated that he was expected to be fired in the very near future, but that's yet to be official, and that they could have some significant change. But one thing is for sure with Florida is that their blue line is going to be a major area of focus, and defenseman Mike Matheson is a prime example of somebody who very well could be shopped. He's making a little over $4 million, so the contract's not that unreasonable. He's got some term on it. He became a healthy scratch late into the series against the New York Islanders, and as they need to improve their blue line, I think he could be very well a player that they look to move. And this, there is some rumors around him as the season ends here for Florida. But like I said, there's going to be a lot of talk about the Panthers. Ownership appears to be wanting to cut salary. We have talk about a GM change. We have talked that they could make some significant trades as well, but we don't know exactly what that's going to be. A lot of that talk will likely resume once we know the future of Dale Talon for sure, and who's going to be running things and what kind of vision do they have for that franchise moving forward. Now, another team we want to look at is the Edmonton Oilers. Of course, they're another team that fell short on expectations this year. And if you take a look at that series against Chicago, a couple of main areas that they need help at is that their blue line needs to get better. They could use some better goaltending, and they could use a little bit more depth in the forward position. Obviously, Connor and Leon had a tremendous series, continue to put up points and be their leaders. At times, they did have some decent secondary scoring on the wings, but they need that on a more consistent basis. But I do think they have a lot of good pieces within the forward group. I mean, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is entering the final year of his contract. There is some question on his future just because he's going to need a new deal. Can they afford to sign him? Could they use him as trade bait, even though they probably wouldn't want to? Would they want to? They're going to have to give up something of value to get something of value. But I don't really think that's really a preference. I think longer term, they'd like to keep him in the fold. He's a more responsible two-way forward, can play center, can play the wing, can be somewhat versatile. So I think he probably does stick around in some capacity. I mean, Zach Kassian didn't have a good series, so he's somebody, obviously they need it more out of in this series to win. Yamamoto has a bright future. James Neal had a pretty decent season overall, considering what they were getting in him after they brought him in from Calgary for Lucic. So overall, I mean, his contract's probably pretty tough to move. They just acquired it. I don't see anything big there. But I mean, Athanasiou is another prime example, future in question. He was acquired from Detroit near the deadline. Does he stick around? Tyler Ennis was injured. He played pretty well, but on a short-term expiring contract. What do they do with him? There certainly are some question marks in the forward group, but they have enough core pieces there that I'm not sure we're going to see anything too significant, but they clearly need some help in goal. They still have Koskinen under contract for some time at a decent amount, but he could use some help. I think more than likely Mike Smith doesn't return. They go through the route of getting a new backup. And the articles we're referencing here as well from ESPN suggest some help on the blue line, but I'm not really sure they're going to go down that road. I don't see the Oilers really making two significant changes on the blue line. I think as a blue line, they need to grow from experience. They have guys like Darnell Nurse and Ethan Bear who gained some valuable experience in this series, and certainly could have had better results, but they're going to take time and experience to do that. Even Caleb Jones is somebody who's been with the organization some time and is still growing too. And they have some top deep prospects in their organization like Evan Bouchard and Philip Broberg. Broberg had an incredible training camp. It's unfortunate he didn't get to play, but at the same time, like they have bright futures back there. So I don't see the Oilers really spending much money in the way of a trade or free agency to really work on the blue line when they have those great prospects in the system. I think they need to grow with them. But goaltending is a big-time area that they need help with. The Oilers proved they could score, but they just couldn't keep their own puck out of the net when it come to holding off Chicago, who had some pretty offensive players as well. So I do expect the Oilers to address goaltending. Defense is probably looked at within, and maybe some tinkering in the forward group. But again, because of the tight salary cap, I think they're going to be somewhat limited to what they can do. But let me know what moves you feel the Oilers need to make to get better for next season in the comments. Now, lastly, here I want to take a look at the Nashville Predators. They're certainly another interesting team. Ever since making the finals in 2017, you could argue things have been somewhat downhill. Now, the following year, they had a great regular season, won the President's Trophy, but didn't have great playoff success. And then ever since then, the playoff success has not come back. They haven't even been able to come close to making it back to the finals like they did back in 2017 when they lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And GM David Poile has been the only general manager in franchise history. He's been there a really long time. He's made a lot of moves. We've seen him be bold and not be afraid to make big signings or big trades. But at the same time, you wonder if maybe something has to give there. Poile has been around a long time. Maybe it's time for him to be elevated to a higher role and have a new voice, a new leadership style come in and kind of try to address this roster. I mean, one of the big areas of need with Nashville is to try to improve their overall scoring. I mean, they haven't been offensive enough. And when you look at their roster, they should be able to score more goals. When you have Matt Duchene and you have Philip Forsberg and you have Ryan Johansson and Granlund and Smith and and even Kyle Turris for that matter, like they have some good offense from the blue line with Roman Josi, Ryan Ellis. It's just, but they don't seem to click well as a team. They don't score much, and they need to improve upon that. And obviously, shedding the contract for Kyle Turris would be a big-time help. Pretty good history, been a pretty solid player in his NHL career, but just has not had that touch in Nashville like he did in Ottawa, and just really hasn't fit. He's making $6 million, still has a lot of years left on the contract. It's going to be very difficult to move, but if the Preds can find a way to move him, that would give them much-needed flexibility, get a fresh start for Turris. But again, like I said, that's wishful thinking, I know, but they have Mikael Granlund and Craig Smith, they're free agents. They need to consider signing one or both of them or replacing them, and they already struggle with offense, and they can be decent offensive players, so what do you do? But if you can't afford both of them, maybe they're limited to only one, but they could find money to sign both if a guy like Turris is traded. But again, where is he going to go? Nashville doesn't seem to be very fond of retaining salary. They never do that, but they might have to in this case because a buyout would be way too long-term commitment, way too expensive. But this team clearly needs some significant change as well. Some of these teams, we're learning that even though they might look good on paper and have okay regular seasons, they're just not built for long-term playoff success. They lost against the Coyotes team who has great goaltending in Darcy Kuemper, but really struggled to score themselves, but didn't really struggle enough against them. So clearly the Predators need a lot of improvement before they can really be considered a cup contender again. And to make that happen, they might have to move out something significant to get something in significance back and obviously that's going to be tough to do. So whether it's David Poile or a different GM, I think it's going to be tough. Ideally, Kyle Turris would be the preferred guy to go, but again, like I said, it's going to be really hard to do. But because of that, if they can't trade Turris, they could be at risk to lose either Granlund or Smith, or maybe both, and their offense next year could be potentially set back even more if they can't find the cap space and deals to get some more offensive players in this lineup. So let me know, what deals do you think the Predators need to make to be able to score more goals and get better for next year? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.